A few days ago, I was discussing COVID-19 and the Omicron variant, as well as Christmas and the New Year, with two parish priests in my neighborhood. With one, I was discussing the issue of social distancing in churches. Christmas is one of those busy times for churches, and the question was, how much of a social distancing should be reintroduced into church for all those Christmas services, 24, 25, 26 December. With the other parish priest, I was discussing about the wisdom of having a Christmas carol in a small church. And what if many people showed up? How can one manage such a concert, such a Christmas carol at a time when we're all aware and rather fearful of this newest Omicron variant of COVID-19? So welcome to Arm Wrestling with COVID-19 in London. This is number 54, and this is basically a mishmash of Omicron and Christmas brought together at the end of the year. And this pretty much is the final episode for 2021 from me on any of my YouTube themes. Now, let's start first with the Omicron variant. The country is wary. The country is cautious. The country is beginning to understand from what it hears, from what it sees, from the news that comes from abroad, other parts of Europe, that this is a nasty and very easily transmissible variant. In fact, the latest stats indicate that about 60% of the current infections of COVID in the country are Omicron related. And another study shows that Omicron is transmitted 70 times, that's 70 times faster than Delta. No wonder that some of the European countries in the EU and further afield are quite worried why they're taking stringent measures. Austria comes to mind, France comes to mind, Germany comes to mind, and that some of those countries are even stopping British tourists or businessmen and women to travel to their countries unless there is a very specific and acceptable reason. Now, the government here, the Prime Minister, his health secretary, and the government tried to respond by upping the standard to Plan B. But what we're being told by the chief scientific and medical advisors is that if we continue simply on Plan B, which is basically use your face masks, try not to mingle too much during the Christmas season, and be careful. If we were to simply do that and leave everything to the discretion of the men and women of this country, then expectations are that soon, given the rates of transmission, there will be roughly some 3,000 to 10,000 hospital admissions per day. This is perhaps one of the reasons why the mayor of London, because London is really the hot spot for the Omicron variant, the London mayor Sadiq Khan actually, in response to this surge, introduced what is known as major incident status, which means that all the public agencies are asked, requested to work together in order to counter shortages in hospital wards, ambulance drivers, etc. Why? Because a lot of these medical and paramedical people are either themselves unwell or they themselves are isolating, and therefore there is a serious shortage in many of those medical institutions, and it is beginning to tell. Now, if you've been living in this country and watching the news on the telly or listening to it on radio, reading about it, you will have no doubt realized that there have been serious disagreements within government and in parliament, particularly within the Conservative Party and Tory politicians, about what measures should be applied to counter this Omicron variant. Some MPs, particularly those Tory MPs who voted against the government, roughly 100 of them, seem to say, no more measures, no more lockdown, no more stringent attempts to limit the spread and transmissibility of this variant. I, of course, and you mightn't disagree with this because you will have heard my previous 53 episodes on this matter, I disagree with those MPs who voted against the government measures that for me were pretty much prophylactic. Do you use passes for large gatherings? Do you do this? Do you do that? I mean, what the government was proposing was nothing compared to what some continental Europeans are proposing today. Now, I understand you don't need to explain to me that a healthy economy is of course important, but surely a healthy economy becomes less important if some of us are dead as a result of this variant, or if our hospitals buckle down under the strain, under the pressure, under the numbers of people being admitted. Aren't they? I mean, I don't know. I find it so intuitive and so clear that asking the question makes me sound a bit silly. But in the absence, I suppose, of proper official leadership, where the government itself is wibble-wobbling on this matter, and the dissensions, the disagreements between health officers on the one hand, we've heard time again about Chris Whitty's views on this, and government ministers, all I can really say, because I have no power to do much more than that, nor do you for that matter, please exercise caution. Use horse sense, common sense, and don't be tempted to do in haste what you might well regret at leisure. Okay, it's difficult. Not seeing relatives and friends, not sharing a Christmas dinner together, not having a nice glass of wine together, not going to the pub, not going out. I understand all this. Believe you me, I understand. I'm not such a fossil that I wouldn't understand what it means to have fun, particularly during a festive season, which in one sense or another epitomizes fun and festivity as much as it does spirituality. But there is a danger lurking out there, a danger that might not actually impact you. You might be lucky enough, fortunate enough, or careful enough not to be impacted by it, but so many other people are. Tens and tens of thousands of cases every day in London and across our 4 nations. So please exercise common sense, exercise caution. You don't need to go out for that extra meal. You don't need to do that extra bit. Limit the number of people with whom you mingle this Christmas season, and don't get all upset if the word, that dreaded word, lockdown, temporary lockdown, a short-circuiting lockdown, comes into effect at some stage after Boxing Day, or even perhaps, I don't know, if government wants to dilly-dally further after New Year's Eve. But when I started this episode, I said it's a mishmash of Omicron variant and Christmas. So, given that the two are coming together in this episode, because it is pretty much middle to end of December 2021, let me say that I'd like to switch here, switch gears, if you wish, and bring out not only caution and advice about COVID-19, but also bring out a couple of verbal baubles, starting with a message, which I haven't done before, and some people have told me, Harry, why don't you say something in French? You pepper your episodes with words and sentences in Armenian, your native language, in Arabic. Why don't you say something in French? After all, France and French language have been a very big part of your life. So I'm going to take this opportunity, this episode at this time of the year, in order to say just few words, very few words, to my French-speaking friends in the United Kingdom and across the channel. Alors, j'aimerais bien ajouter quelques mots en français, tout simplement pour rappeler mes amis qu'il est né le divin enfant, le renouveau qu'il nous rappelle pour l'an prochain. Alors, joyeux Noël à vous tous et toutes. Passez un bon moment, mais soyez prudents. And despite the worry and the gloom of this season, I was telling you about one parish priest talking about social distancing, yes or no, in the church, the other about Christmas carol in a tiny little church. So despite all the gloom and all the worry and all the fears of this season, I'd like to conclude this 54th episode with a meditation. And I'd like this meditation to be from the late Karl Rahner. He was an influential German Jesuit priest and theologian who died in Austria, I believe, in 1984. And I quote, "At Christmas, through this grace-filled birth, God says, I am here. I am with you. I am your life. Do not be afraid to be happy. I have sheltered safely in the cold stable of your world. I am there. Even if you do not see me, I am here. It is Christmas. Light the candles. They have more right to exist than all the darkness." How powerful is this? And you don't have to be one of those pious or even, I don't like, pietistic Christians who are going to get all excited by this quotation. No, it is one that applies to everybody. We can look at it differently, but yes, indeed, light the candles. They have more right to exist than all the darkness. All I've said in this episode, as you do light those candles, be careful with the matches. Don't burn your fingers while you're lighting the candles. So happy holidays to you all, whether in a manger or in a mansion. and no matter who your own prophet is and what are your favorite mince spice. Take care, and I suppose I could say until 2022.